Hello guys, Mo here, and today I bring to you forth a very special video voted by you all. And today I will be presenting you my top 10 favorite historical tanks. This mainly includes tanks from the Second World War and some of its variants in total. Tanks have always been a fascinating part of my life, especially around the history. From watching shows like Greatest Tank Battles, Band of Brothers, to simply video games like Men of War Assault Squad, Ruse, and of course sci-fi games like Halo. I love all manners of tanks, from the simple T-34 to the mammoth tank of GDI from Command & Conquer, all the way up to like the Scorpion from Halo. I would also like to thank for getting up to 70 subscribers in total before this video is even released. I thank you all tremendously very much, and thank you all for the amount of likes and comments received on my last, well, pretty much big up tier list. If you like this content and like to see more of it, please consider subscribing. But anyhow, let's get into the video of the top 10 historical tanks by myself, of course. Now let's get into it. Number 10, the M36 Jackson GMC self-propelled anti-tank gun. This tank weighed approximately 29 tons and had 5 crew members in total. The armor of the tank was very light compared to its main counterparts such as the M4 Sherman. It however carried a 90mm anti-tank gun. This tank was specifically designed to hunt down tanks. This was called the Tank Destroyer Doctrine. It called for lightly armored but fast anti-tank hunters that would be in design to destroy any armored breakthrough or spearhead before the main force arrives to deal with that said threat. The 2,300 versions built during the war, and it went and saw right up till the Bosnian War, involved in all sorts of conflicts from the Second World War, Korean War, all the way up to the Iran-Iraq War. Number 9, the M24 Chaffee Light Tank. This tank weighed 18 tons and had a crew of 5. Like its counterpart, the M36, this tank was light but carried a 75mm gun instead. Yeah, again, this was a light tank, so it was to flank and surround the enemy forces until the main, medium, and heavy tanks would arrive to deal with said tanks. There was more than 4,700 tanks developed of the Chaffee. This tank had saw action in both the Second World War, the Korean War, and even the Vietnam War. In Girls and Panzer, this was one of the few scout tanks the All-Stars University team brought to their annihilation match against Ori. Number 8 is a very heavy tank. We have the Tiger II, the predecessor of the Tiger I heavy tank. The tank's weight was varied depending on its current stage, but it overall weighed 69 tons and had a crew compartment of 5. It had carried the same gun as its predecessor of the Tiger I, which would be the 88mm cannon. But unlike the Tiger I, this tank had far more armor. This tank had less than 500 units developed, as this tank was developed during the late stages of the war compared to its other predecessors due to Allied bombing. For what units survived the war, they are being held up in museums across the world to showcase how powerful the German armor and science was at that time, to display how effective heavy tanks can be, but not in the right way as such. In Girls and Panzer, this tank was used by Korps Marine primarily, and one of his main users was Erika Itsumi, the vice commander of that school. Number 7 is a tank that never saw the light of action during the Second World War, but was featured throughout the Cold War, and that was being the Centurion MBT, one of the first main battle tanks developed. This tank weighed approximately 50 tons and had a crew compartment of 4. This was first deemed as a universal tank, a tank that can do everything in all manners of ways. It had good enough armor and a powerful 105mm cannon. There was more than 4,400 tanks developed of this class, and it had very extensive action from the Korean War, Vietnam War, the Suez Crisis, and right all the way up to the Lebanon War. In Girls and Panzer, this tank was used as the flag tank, or in general the command tank, for Alice Shimada of the All-Stars University team. Number 6 is a personal favorite of mine and is one of the first super heavy tanks that I fell in love with, the T-28, or otherwise a T-95 if you're from the game Ruse. This tank weighed a colossal 86 tons and had a crew compartment of 4. Being a late stage super heavy tank, this tank was heavily armored and had a 105mm cannon. This tank was designed as a bunker buster tank on the move, otherwise known as an assault gun. This tank was also set to be part of the invasion of Japan before the program in total was terminated. There was only 2 of these tanks ever built, and one of them is being held up in a museum at this current moment in the US Army and Cavalry collection. In Girls and Panzer, this tank was used as a major headache against Ori and their support as an extremely heavy tank, and was only taken out by Darjeeling's strategy. Number 5 is a very recognizable tank from the war itself, the Panzer IV medium tank. This tank weighed approximately 25 tons and had a crew compartment of 5. Much like any given medium tank developed, this tank was developed throughout the Second World War, equipped with a bigger gun and extra armor in the end as its whole. There was more than 8,500 units, including all of its variants, and they all saw action through the Second World War all the way up to the 1973 Yom Kippur War. In Girls and Panzer, this tank was used as the flag tank of Ori and used by Miho Nishizumi. Number 4 is the M26 Pershing heavy/medium tank. Weighed approximately 41 tons, close to 42, and had a crew compartment of 5 in total. This tank first saw action during the Battle of Cologne, where it dueled against a Panther tank who originally thought it was one of their own tanks. So for being a heavy tank, this tank's armor was very heavy and had a powerful gun. 2000s variants developed, and this tank saw action from the late stages of the Second World War all the way up to the Korean War and so on. In Girls and Panzer, this was the primary tank of the All-Stars University team, being used by the Bermuda Trio themselves. Number 3 is the Tiger 1 heavy tank. This tank weighed 54 tons and had a crew compartment of 5. What I find quite fascinating on how this tank works is that it was deployed on all fronts of the war, from the African front, Italian front, the Western front, and the Eastern front. This tank, like the Tiger II, had an 8.8, or otherwise known as an 88mm cannon. This tank had 1,300 units developed during the war. One of the few Tiger tanks that have survived the war is called Tiger 131, a famous tank that is being held in the Bovington Tank Museum in Dorchester, England, and was featured in the film Fury. In Girls and Panzer, this tank was used as the flag tank for Koromori Mini and was used by Maho Nishizumi. Number 2 is what pretty much saved the Second World War, the T-34 medium tank. This tank weighed 26 tons in its earliest stages, and then it had weighed up to 32 tons when it got its 85mm cannon. This tank was one of the first tanks to be developed massively, like we're talking in the tens of thousands, with approximately 80,000 developed, with half of those being the 85mm variants. This also includes its variants. During the war, these tanks were proven to be very claustrophobic, and among other issues including, in its early stages, a weaker gun compared to what the Germans were fielding at that current time. While no doubt this tank was advanced for its time, it lacked in training numbers and other stuff, etc. What wars it had fought in include World War II as usual, but in more recent times it has been seen in action in the current Yemeni civil war, continuing right up till 2024. In Girls and Panzer, this tank made up the primary force of Pravda, the main school of the Soviet Union, and this was Katyusha's flag tank. And finally, our number 1 tank, for me personally, would be the N4 Sherman. The M4, like the T-34, was mass produced to simply drown out the number of tanks being developed quality by overachieving in quantity, simply quality over quantity type of progress. However, it did not make any sense for this tank to be as bad as it could have been thought of. This tank was very reliable and could be easily modified to suit various types of different roles. The armor was okay at best, and its 75mm gun was alright, especially when dealing with infantry, but against heavy tanks of some kind, they have to simply surround the enemy tank with good enough numbers and hope we get a hit at that said tank. Would also like to mention it also weighed 30 to 38 tons, depending on its variant, and its crew compartment was 5. This tank had 49,000 built and includes all of its variants in total. In Girls and Panzer, this was the primary and most pretty much all-round tank of Saunders High School, except for Naomi's tank, which was a British Firefly. That was my top 10 historical tank videos. I had originally designed it as a vote between either using fictional, historical, or a mixture of both on Twitter. And I would also like to give a massive thanks to all the kindness and comments given to me on my very last video on, well, not exactly the last video, but the video on the Girls and Panzer 1K tier list video, which was quite impressive, may I say. I thank everyone for assisting me out on that video, especially when it came to the software in terms of what can I do with that said software. Now then, of course, I am so far developing schedule with one video per 2 weeks and a couple of shorts in between, and I thank everyone for such patience on this video. Anyhow, that is the end of this said video. Anyhow, see you all on the next video. Mo out.
新しい選択だね。